right, so hello there, everyone, and welcome to our third interview with wellness advocates and community. So we're kind of all over the place. The person we had last week, she was in Texas, and now we have Dee, you're Florida, right?
Yeah, I used to live in Ohio, now I'm in Florida.
Yeah, so we're on our third interview today, but before we jump in to the interview with Dee, we had a quick and exciting announcement to make. So me and Amanda, we brought both of our businesses together, so Carve Your Own Path and Guidance and Growth. We also kind of are bringing together our unique skill sets, our interests and talents, and we've kind of merged and developed Grow Your Path to Wellness. So you'll notice this. I know, we're so excited about it. See where it goes. So, but don't be alarmed. You'll notice it just like change on your different platforms. So on our podcast, YouTube channels, we'll have a separate logo. But like I said, don't be alarmed. It's still us. And stay tuned for some new stuff to come. But we're super excited.
Yeah, getting that name and trying to incorporate both of our businesses took a minute, but we got it.
We're like, we got them both equally represented, but it needed to sound good. So that's what we came up with, and I love it. All right, so we'll get with Dee. So let's say hello to today's advocate, Dee James. So if you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us about current roles and
so many. So my name's Dee, and as I said, I used to live in Ohio. I went to Kent State, so I have my bachelor's in youth development and human development and family studies, but I specialized in youth development. And then I went back because I loved it there so much, and I just gave them all my money, just on repeat. So I went back for grad school and became a licensed school counselor, and then I ended up moving to Florida because it doesn't snow here. And I've been here, this is my 8th year of being a elementary school counselor here in Florida. But I'm also a wife, a mom, an advocate on many different platforms, which I can explain as we get into it a little bit, but it never stops. The fun never stops.
Dee, you can get into it. What are some of the things that you do? What is your role? Like, what do you feel like you're advocating for on a daily basis? Just, you don't have to go into detail, but like, what are different areas you find yourself advocating in?
So just in general, as an elementary school counselor, I wear a million hats. And part of that is because I'm constantly trying to balance my time between providing direct services to my students, but then the many other non-counseling related responsibilities that are kind of doled out to us. So with that, I am also on the board for the Pinella School Counselor Association. I'm the secretary, but I'm also the advocacy chairperson, which was not a thing until I joined the board, but now it is. And then I serve on a committee for the Florida School Counselor Association, also advocacy related. It's a school-based advocacy committee. And between the two of those, last year I was invited to participate in a leadership development institute with the American School Counselor Association, which was really cool because I got to collaborate with people from all over the country that are doing the things that I'm doing day to day. And that was a year ago, and I still collaborate with them. So that was a really great experience. We do have a teachers union here in my district. So I've partnered with them in the past to kind of speak up on the needs of school counselors here in our district so that we can be available to our students, because again, we have a lot of non-counseling related responsibilities, and basically it's the teachers union, but we're for all intents and purposes, we're instructional staff. So we're under the same contract. So I kind of work with them to fine tune what is in our contract so that it, allows for us as school counselors to do our jobs more efficiently, which also allowed me to get our title changed from guidance to school counselor when they renegotiated our contract. So I was successful in doing that too. So I don't know. And none of this was intentional. That's just where things have taken me because I'm so passionate about being there for my students. And when that can't happen, I'm looking for solutions. And so I just have ended up partnering with all these different people over the last 7.5 years. And now I have more hats to wear, but I love it. I wouldn't change it.
Okay, Dee, you said it a couple times, and you just said you got the name change. So set the record straight for our listeners, because guidance and school counselor, as you know, are used so interchangeably. And it's similar to me and Kelsi, right? You know, people call us Dr. Kelsi, Dr. Amanda, and we're like, we're not a doctor. Or,
Right.
you know, I've been to a psychiatrist. Oh, actually, that was a psychologist. So, and there's different, you know, so I think this is so important and a good platform for you to explain. And if you can share some of like the history, I know you mentioned to me before, that's so helpful.
Yeah. So guidance counseling started in the 1930s, and basically it was like career guidance, and that's really all it was at that time. So, you know, just looking at someone's strengths and what their goals were and getting them on the right path to either join the military or whatever it was at that time. And over the years, the easiest way I can explain it is now we provide school-based counseling services. So it's night and day from what guidance counseling was and what school counseling is now. So my job as a school counselor is to provide as many direct services as I can. It should be at least 80% of my time. I should be providing direct services to students and families, which again is a bit of a struggle. And within that, there are 3 domains. There's the academic development domain, personal, social, and then career development. So even at the elementary school level, we do focus on career development as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell what my job is. There's 3 main ways that I do that. Individual counseling is the biggest. I do small group counseling, although not at the moment because there's so many restrictions in the school setting. And then classroom lessons, which are more of a preventative approach instead of a reactive approach to issues that may come up.
Oh, so do you go in, like, do you go into teachers' classrooms and, you know?
Yeah. So a lot of what I try to do as many direct counseling services as I can, but I also try to spend a lot of time in the classrooms because that way I'm reaching literally every student. So for me, I have over 650 students at my school, and I'm the only school counselor. So you can kind of see how that is a struggle. And one more thing to juggle, right? But the National School Counseling Model states that there should be at least 1 school counselor for every 250 students, just within that model that I described. So then you add on all of the non-counseling responsibilities and it just stacks up. So I'm basically doing the job of like four full-time employees on a daily basis on a good day. But I do go into all the classrooms. I teach bullying prevention, which is state mandated. We just got a state mandate last year to include some human trafficking awareness and prevention pieces. So I'm doing that as well. And then just at the elementary level, I focus heavily on like the social emotional stuff because that really is where the foundation for many things begins. And so I try to give our kids as many tools and skills as possible at that age.
Very cool. And I think getting classroom setting helps. You see them using those skills in a classroom setting. I mean, I do tons myself and, you know, individual services, but seeing them in that classroom setting in itself can be really powerful and really explain, you know, their needs and things. So.
Right. And it really allows me to connect with every student so that when the time comes that they need my help, they feel comfortable approaching me. I'm not just some stranger that lives in one part of the building. Like I'm literally all over the building all day, every day. But it's good because then I can connect with them. And like I said, when the time comes, they're comfortable coming to my office and speaking with me.
Dee, you know, Kelsi and I are like the integrated care advocates. So it's like one of the foundational integrated care models, right? You know, like being in the school versus being in a doctor's office, you know, like showing your face so that when there does need to be a warm handoff or there is a concern, you're not this scary school counselor, right? You're not this scary monster that I don't know what's going to happen. I've seen your face. I feel comfortable. I feel warm. Back then you were probably hugging more and all those things.
Always. Yeah. Yeah, and I have to be real clear too. Like I have to set a lot of boundaries because there is sometimes that discrepancy between what my job is, but then also what my job isn't. So I have to be very direct about that because the lines can get blurred. And so the kids know they're never ever in trouble when they come to see me. Like that they know that because they need to know that. But sometimes I find that with adults, they think that part of my job is discipline and they come to me when they're in trouble, and that is like so far from the case. But So things like that I have to clear up a lot too. I'm not an administrator, so like if our principal or assistant principal is not available, that doesn't then default to me because that's not my job either. Like there's all these little things too that I have to kind of undo some thinking of. But I think that that partially goes back to the whole guidance counselor mentality. But I truly am there to provide school-based counseling services, and that's really what I try to do as much as I can.
Very good. Very good. So, and Dee, like in the school setting, what do you feel like is maybe not fair to say the largest, but in like I said, just your perspective, what do you feel like is the largest mental health related need that you see in your role as a school counselor?
So for me, this is my 8th year, and obviously we're in like a whole different world at the moment. But even prior to this whole COVID stuff, I've seen like a steady increase in the amount of anxiety within our kids, which sometimes surprises people because I'm at the elementary school. But I think it's for so many reasons. I mean, we live in such a fast-paced society. There's such this like instant gratification mentality across the board with adults and our kids alike. And none of us are wired for that, but especially our kids developmentally, it's so inappropriate. And then within the school setting, there's so many things too. Like we rely heavily on data-driven decision making. So there's a lot of pressure on these kiddos when it comes to testing and grades because that's all of the data that we look at. And so they know, like when we have these standardized tests, there's a lot riding on it. And that's a lot. It's a lot for anybody, and it's a lot for our students. Then you add to that, like the monthly fire drills that we have. And then a couple of years ago, after the incident at Parkland, our security measures within our school setting tightened up a lot. Like it went from 0 to 100. So when the kids came back to school that fall, we had an armed security officer on campus every day. We still do. All of the classrooms got doors because we had this kind of open pod design for the longest time. All of these doors were getting installed. All the doors have to be locked. There's glass up where there never used to be glass up. Like all of these things. And then we have monthly drills now in case there's ever, we call them active assailant drills. So in my school, we have a pre-K unit too. So my students are ages 3 to about 11. So imagine being 3 years old and every month you have to pretend that there's an active assailant on campus and you have to either hide in the bathroom or run out of the building or know where your meetup location is in case everybody has to kind of get out in a hurry, or all these things we're doing on a monthly basis. And so, you know, with all of those things kind of stacked on top of each other, it's a lot for anybody to process. It gives me anxiety and I'm kind of in it and trying to navigate it as an adult. So for our students, I've seen a lot of just anxiety over the years and like panic attacks with our students. The school nurse and we're really fortunate that we have a full-time school nurse because some schools don't, but we have a unit with students who have like medical needs that are pretty severe. We also have a student who's diabetic, so we have to have a full-time nurse, which I'm so thankful for because she and I partner up a lot. And so like she sees students on repeat with, you know, stomach aches and headaches or all these anxiety symptoms. And then she'll kind of fill me in, hey, can you check in with such and such? And, you know, it's usually a case of they're nervous or they're worried or they're putting all this pressure on themselves and they don't know what that is or how to verbalize it and ask for help. So I kind of have to guide them through that. But I've seen that increase, like I said, over the years. So to me, that's the biggest one. And then trying to undo that is hard because none of these things are going away. And of course, we're in the middle of a health crisis at the moment, which only adds to it. So, but to me, that's the biggest thing.
Here we said what changes have you noticed and related to, you know, the mental health needs of the kiddos whenever it comes to, you know, with COVID going on and especially, you know, this extended period of time of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's changing day to day. So it's really up and down. The kids got sent home on March 13th for spring break and then they didn't come back. And, you know, it just kind of kept getting pushed further out as far as when they were going to be able to return. We moved to virtual learning. So that was, you know, a whole different experience in and of itself, trying to go from, in person to virtual instruction, which none of us were prepared for. We had to invent something that never existed in a moment's notice, and then try to teach our students how to navigate all of that. And then, of course, it was summer break. So then when we came back, parents had been given the option as to whether or not they wanted to send their students back in person or keep them at home and do school virtually. So it ended up being about like a 60-40 split. So about 40% of our students stayed home. The rest came back in person. So of course that meant we had to go back in person as well. I also have a son that attends my school. He's 9, he's in 4th grade. So he actually stayed home and did virtual school for a little while. And then I was in the school setting, kind of navigating that with all of my students. So I really got a sense of both ends of it. And it's a lot. There's a lot of changes at the moment. The kids are supposed to stay 6 feet apart as much as possible, which is really hard. Also, they're kids. So like, that's just even like saying that out loud, it sounds impossible. But then like the logistics of trying to maintain that all day. They have to wear masks all day. They can take them off outside for recess and PE, which it's like 1,000,000 degrees outside. So, I mean, they need to, but, and they're supposed to still kind of distance from one another. They can't mix with other kids from other classes, which is a big reason why I'm not running small groups at the moment, because I can't even pull kids, from a certain grade level like I normally would, because they have to stay within, they call it a cohort. They have to stay within their cohort all day. They can't blend with others. There's markers up and down the hallway of like spots where they're supposed to stand so that they're fully distanced. There's hand sanitizing stations. The cafeteria is nothing like it used to be, and we have all these plexiglass dividers up, so kids have to kind of sit in a cubicle when they take their mask off to eat lunch with these like clear dividers. So like the social aspect of it is very different for them too, because that's usually their time to really connect with the other kids, and they're so spread out at the moment. So a lot has changed with that. And like I said, it's just every day we're getting new directives from our district. So it's just rapidly unfolding. The teachers are teaching in person and online, some of them simultaneously, which is a lot to manage. So yeah, it's just kind of this snowball effect, and we never know what else is coming down the pipeline, but the kids are handling it so much better than I thought they were going to. And I think for the most part, they're just so glad to reconnect with everybody. And it's hard because we're not supposed to hug each other. And like, I'm usually like, I give a lot of mom hugs. That's what we call them. So I usually have like a parade of kids that come in the morning before school because they just need a mom hug. And I can't give them that right now, which is really a struggle. So I've been giving them a lot of elbow bumps and things like that. I've done a lot of like silly dancing in the hallway and just fun ways to reconnect with them without kind of crossing that boundary. And that's the same with our teachers. Like they're trying so hard to reconnect with our kids, but in a way that is safe at the moment. So we definitely have our hands full, but the kids are handling it so well. And like, they just always amaze me with how resilient they are, and they just kind of roll with it. As long as you explain it to them and allow them to ask questions and give them some kind of a voice and sense of control amidst all of the unknowns right now. I mean, I think they've been doing a really good job. And I tell them that all the time. They need to hear it.
That makes sense. So, Dee, this isn't part of our questioning, but no, I'm just kidding. What I was thinking of is you said that the hugging part is hard, and then kids also don't understand the boundaries a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. Just a quick funny story. Yesterday we went and played in the sunflower fields, and someone took a picture for us, and my 6-year-old nephew was with us. And afterward, I missed it. I had already turned around and started to walk away, but he ran over to the guy that took the picture and hugged him and said, "Thank you." And my heart melted. And then I said, "Oh, boundaries." So yes, it's so true. And then, like you have kids from 3 to 11. Yes. And then they need that love, and they have all those, things going on at home where that you were that extra support for them. And it's really tough. So going to the home part, what should parents know? Like, what do they need to know about mental health in schools. I think a lot of times, you know, parents aren't educated themselves, so they think they're just sending their kid to school and they don't know why they feel sick and don't want to go in the morning, or why they aren't able to get this good grade, or why they just can't pass that test, or why, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so can you kind of like we could talk for days about this, but what are your general tips or information or validation normalizing for parents with mental health?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, and this is across the board in any situation really, but it's just that ongoing open communication between home and school, because a lot of times, like, kids sometimes present differently within those two settings. And so we don't know what goes on at home unless you fill us in. And you may not realize as a parent what is happening at school unless, you know, we're able to connect. And so, of course, we try to connect with our parents as much as we can. Sometimes, you know, it can be a struggle, but it's so important because then we can work collaboratively as a team to meet that child's individual needs, because there's never, you know, one size fits all model, and every child reacts to things differently. So, you know, if there's changes going on within the home, they may be kind of holding a lot of stuff in. I see this all the time because they don't want to upset the parents, or they don't want to make things worse, or they think that something is their fault, even though it's totally not usually. And then they come to school and all these behaviors are happening because it has to go somewhere, right? It just starts coming out. And so maybe they're, you know, lashing out at their friends, or maybe they're getting in trouble with their teacher in the classroom. And it's like no one can quite put their finger on what's going on until, you know, the lines of communication are open. So to me, that's the biggest thing. And as a school counselor, I started sending home monthly newsletters to our parents, and I talk about what I'm doing in each of the domains that I described earlier each month, so that they can then facilitate those conversations at home. So I try to let them know what it is I'm talking about within the classroom setting that month. So this week, or this past week rather, we just did Start with Hello Week, which is through the Sandy Hook Promise program. And it's really simple, but it can lead into so many important discussions as well. So the Start with Hello program has 3 steps. If you see someone that's alone or having a tough time, then you reach out to them and offer to help, and you start by saying hello. Like, that's it. But that leads to bullying prevention and suicide prevention and all of these mega things that you would never even think of, but the conversation can kind of build on itself and lead into that. So I, as a school counselor, try to send home things just to keep parents in the loop, because I want to facilitate those conversations at home as well. And any student that is in my small groups that I meet with weekly, I send home a letter like, this is what we did this week. And so then they can facilitate that conversation further at home and build on whatever it was that we were doing in our group that week. So I'm all about communication, but especially between home and school, because like I said, there's so many things that don't translate between the two unless you really put that effort in to make that happen.
Okay, follow-up question.
Hit me.
Now, the reason why I brought you on today is because you are a phenomenal school counselor. Like, you talk and my heart is warm and I want to cry and I just want to hug you all the way in Florida for all the work you do with all of our kids. The fact that you send these newsletters home, you have constant communication. I mean, Dee has shared the most beautiful, amazing things she's done with these kids to make sure they know that someone's out there and has their back. Now, we know that that's not always the case because, you know, some people might have 1,000 kids in their school and no resources and they're just exhausted themselves. So if they don't, if a parent doesn't have a school counselor that's reaching out, or, you know, what specific steps should they take? Should they call the principal first? Should they call the teacher first? Like, what's a good starting point realistically?
I would definitely call the teacher, because I think, you know, the principal oversees everything within the school. So they have a lot of things going on and they may not know that child specifically, or, you know, whatever is going on. If you contact the teacher, they're with that child 5 days a week, 7 hours a day, and they're your best resource. And if there's things that are in need of greater support, then they can kind of reach out to whatever supports are within that particular school setting and try to, you know, get a team together to collaborate and work towards addressing that child's needs, because every school is different as far as what personnel they have on staff, and there's a number of reasons for that. For me, I'm fortunate in that I have a school psychologist that's there 4 days a week, so she and I partner up a lot. I also have a school social worker who's there 2 days a week. So the three of us are our student services team, and we partner up on so many things. We do, my school social worker and I do home visits. If, we need to reach out to a family and we're being unsuccessful in getting a hold of them, we'll just stop by. My school psychologist and I look more at the academic side of things because there's kids, that really struggle and we can't quite figure out why that is. So we kind of partner up on that end of things as well. So, but every school is different as far as who they have on staff. Some schools have a behavioral specialist as well. So there's all kinds of things. So I would reach out to the teacher, see what supports are available and kind of go from there because every school is different.
That makes a lot of sense. Goes along so well with our, like Amanda said earlier, the integrated care approach with having all of these different professionals in one area. And that was a good question from Amanda, the follow-up, because I think a lot of parents, like you said, they don't know where to start. So giving them that recommendation is super helpful. Did you have any last minute thoughts or tips that you want to pass on before we wrap up, Dee?
No, I mean, if you don't have a school counselor at your school, I hope you do. But if you don't, I would really reach out and maybe contact your school board or the area superintendent that you have, because mental health is such a huge part of everybody as individuals, but our kids especially, think about some of the adults, that were never having these conversations as they were growing up. And I mean, we have, obviously elementary, middle, and high school here, and we have a school counselor, at least one, sometimes multiple, in almost every school. There's a few that don't, but that's something too that we're working to address because it's so important. And the work that we do as school counselors is really, again, to kind of help them develop that foundation so that they can be successful in those three domains that I mentioned earlier: academically, personally, socially, emotionally, and then career-wise, even beyond high school. So it starts in elementary, and then the work that I do is then built on by the middle school counselors, is then built on by the high school counselors. So, and vote for your local school district when the time comes, because we need that too.
Yeah, it's kind of like identifying an area. You as a parent, you can tell that, if you feel like something's lacking or if you want your questions, it's just a matter of, figuring out the go-to person and asking it and getting the ball rolling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, but thank you so much, Dee.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Joining us. We really appreciate it. So just make sure everyone stay tuned for our next week. We will be interviewing Jasmine Patterson, and she'll be sharing her journey to a positive mindset and a healthy and happy perspective on life. So it sounds like